If you are looking for 100% scholarship in the UK, stop scrolling because this video might be exactly what you need. Hi everyone, my name is Vincent. I'm currently doing a master at Loughborough University in the UK. I was awarded the Global Impact Scholarship this year. Recently, quite a few people have reached out to me asking about this scholarship, like how to approach it, what to write, and whether it's difficult to get. And I realized that there aren't really many videos or posts sharing experience about this scholarship, so I thought, why not make one myself? So in this video, I will share my experience, how I approach this, and some practical advice that I think I could help you if you're planning to apply for this scholarship. So let's get started. First of all, what exactly is the Global Impact Scholarship? Well, basically, this is a full tuition scholarship offered by Loughborough University for international master students. But what makes it different is that it's not just about the grades, it's about your impact and leadership potential. They are looking for people who not only perform well academically, but also have the qualities to lead and drive positive, sustainable change in their communities. So it's less about being the top student and more about who you are, what you've done, and the impact that you can create. So next, let's talk about eligibility. First of all, you need to have an offer from Loughborough, either it's conditional or unconditional for an eligible master program. You also need to be currently living in one of the eligible countries listed by the university. For the full list, you can check it on the official website of the university. I will leave the link in the description below. And in terms of academics, they expect a strong academic background, usually equivalent to a first-class degree. You also need to show a clear commitment to contributing to your home country or community after graduation. And importantly, they also look for strong motivation, especially your ability to secure funding for your living costs, since the scholarship only covers for tuition fees. So overall, they are looking for high caliber candidates with qualities to lead and create sustainable impact. So now, let's move to the main part of the videos, how I approached the application. One interesting I noticed is that the structure had actually changed compared to last year. When I applied, the questions were more combined. I only had to answer around 2 main questions, but this year they've been broken down into 5 separate questions. And honestly, I think the core idea is still exactly the same. The soul of what they're asking hasn't changed. It's still about your leadership, your impact, and your future direction. The only difference is that now it's more structured. Instead of trying to compress everything into 1 or 2 quick answers, you now have the chance to explain each part way more clearly. And in a way, I actually think this is an advantage because you can highlight your strengths in each area much better. So let me quickly walk you through the 5 questions and how I think you should approach them. Starting with the first question, they ask you to provide evidence of your ability to lead and influence others. And I think this is a really important one because a lot of people misunderstand it. Most people think this is about listing leadership positions, like saying I was a team leader or I managed a project. But actually, this is not what they're looking for. What they really want to see is how you took initiative, worked with other people, influenced decisions, and created real results. So instead of focusing on titles, I focused on specific examples, situations where I identified a problem, took action, and led others towards a clear outcome. When answering this question, I structured it very simple. The context, my role, what I actually did, and how I influenced others and the final result. And I think the key here is this: don't just tell them you are the leader, show it through a real story. For example, think about a situation where people actually moved because of your actions. Maybe you brought a team together, convinced stakeholders to support an idea, or have people work towards a shared goal. So that's the kind of evidence they are looking for. If I have to give you a few quick tips for this question, first, focus on one strong example. Don't try to include too many. Second, focus on your action and how you influenced others, not just your role. And third, make sure your result is clear and specific. So that's how I approach question 1. And once you've shown your leadership, the next question naturally builds on that, which is your actual contribution and impact. Moving on to question 2. This is about your previous contributions to your communities or your field of study. And honestly, I think this is one of the most questions in the whole application, because this is where you show your actual impact, not what you plan to do, but what you already done. A common mistake here is that people describe what they were involved in, but they don't really clearly show the impact they created. So instead of just saying, I participated in this project, I worked on this initiative, you really need to explain what changed because of your action. For me, I focused on 1 or 2 key examples where I could clearly show 3 things: the problem, what I did, and the impact it created. The impact doesn't have to be huge, but it can be small, but it needs to be real and specific. For example, who did it help? What actually improved? What changed as a result of your work? And if possible, try to make it measurable. Even simple number can make story much stronger. I think the key mindset here is this: don't just talk about what you did, talk about what difference it made. I give you some more tips about this. First, choose example where your contribution is clear, not something too general. Second, focus on outcomes, not just activities. And third, try to make your impacts as concrete as possible. So once you've clearly shown your past contribution and impact, the next questions then move forward, which is why you choose your course and how it connects to your future plan. So moving on to question 3. This is about why you choose your course at Loughborough and how it connects you to your future plans. And I think this is one of the most misunderstood questions. A lot of people actually treat it like a typical why this course question, talking about module ranking and how good the university is, but actually that's not the main point here. What they really want to understand is, does this course make sense in your bigger stories? And so instead of focusing on one of the course itself, I connected it to a problem I care about and what I want to achieve it in the future. In other words, the course is not the goal, it's the tool that help you create impact. So when answering this question, I focus on 3 things: what I want to do in the future, what skill I'm missing right now, and how this specific course helped me bridge the gap. A few tips for this question. First, don't just describe the course, connect it to your goals. Second, be specific about what you want to learn and why. And third, make sure your stories feels consistent with everything you said before. So once you explained why this course makes sense for you, the next question naturally looks at your future, what you actually want to achieve, and the kind of impact you want to create. So moving on to question 4. This is about what you aim to achieve after your degree and how you plan to lead positive change in your community or field. And I think this is where they really assess your vision, because it's not just about what you've done in the past anymore, it's about where you're going and whether your goals actually make sense. A common mistake here is being too vague or too ambitious, saying things like, I want to change the world, without a clear plan. So what I did instead was to keep it grounded and realistic. I focused on specific area I care about, explain what kind of problem I want to solve, and outlined how I could realistically contribute to that after my degree. So again, it comes back to the same idea. Your future plan should connect naturally with your past experience and your chosen course. And when everything links together, your story becomes much more convincing. So a few tips for this question would be: first, be specific about what you want to achieve, avoid being too general. Second, make your goals realistic and actionable, not just ambitious. And third, clearly explain how you will create positive impact, not just about what you want. So finally, question 5. Question 5 is about how you plan to engage in the university community beyond your academic studies. And I think this is a question that people don't pay enough attention to, because it sounds simple, but what they're really trying to understand is what kind of person you would be in their community. Are you someone who just focused on studying, or someone who actively contributes and creates values for others. So instead of giving very generic answers, I try to be more specific about how I would involved. For example, joining certain societies, contributing to student initiatives, sharing my experience, or connecting with people from different backgrounds. I think the key here is show that you are proactive, that you don't just wait for opportunities, but you actively create them. A few quick tips for these questions. First, avoid generic answers. Try to be as specific as possible. Second, show how your background or experience can add value to the community. And third, focus on contribution, not just participation. So, overall, even though this is the last question, it still plays an important role in completing your overall story. If you look at all 5 questions together, they are really just telling one story: who you are, what you've done, and the impact that you're going to create. To wrap up, I want to go a bit deeper into a few key things that I think really make a difference in the application. First, use the clear structures when you write. For example, the STAR method: situation, task, action, and result. This is not just useful for this scholarship. You can actually apply it to almost everything, from your essay, your reports, and even interviews later on. It helps you explain your ideas in a very clear and logical way, instead of jumping between points or writing in a confusing structure. So when you use STAR, you're basically guiding the reader step by step. When the situation was, what you needed to do, what action you took, and what result you achieved. And that makes your answers much easier to follow and much more convincing. Second, focus on I, not we. This is a very common mistake. People often write things like, we did this, our team achieved that, but the scholarship is evaluating you as an individual. So even if you worked on a team, you need to make it very clear what you did, what your specific role was, what decisions you made, and how you contributed to the outcome. Third, always focus on impact, not just activity. Don't just describe what you were involved in. Instead, ask yourself, what actually changed because of what I did? Who did it help? What improved? What problem was solved? Third, always focus on impact, not just activity. Don't just describe what you were involved in. Instead, ask yourself, what actually changed because of what I did? What improved? What problem was solved? That shift from activity to impact is what makes your answer stand out. And to make that even stronger, try to quantify your impact whenever possible. Numbers don't have to be perfect, but they make your story much more concrete. For example, instead of saying I improved a process, you can say I improved efficiency by 20%, or I supported over 100 users, or the project expanded to 3 different regions. Even a simple number helps the reader understand the scale of your impact. And finally, think bigger, but stay realistic. The scholarship is looking for people who can create meaningful impact at scale. So don't just say you want to graduate and get a job. Talk about the bigger goal you are working towards. What kind of change you want to create in your field, your country, or even more broadly. But at the same time, make sure your plan is realistic. Show the steps, how this course help you, what you will do after, and how that leads to impact. Overall, don't try to sound overly impressive. Focus on being clear, structured, and real. Make sure your impact is easy to understand. And before I wrap up, I also want to quickly go through a few common questions that I received. The first question is, should you apply as early as possible? It is the first come first served scholarship. And the answer for this is no. The scholarship is not first come first served. As long as you apply before the deadline, your application will be considered the same as everybody else. So there's no need to rush just to submit early. In fact, I would recommend focusing on the quality of your application instead. Take the time to refine your answers and make sure your story is clear and convincing. But one important thing to remember is that you need to have an offer from the university first before you can apply for the scholarship. So make sure you apply for your course early to secure your place, and then take your time to prepare for a strong scholarship application. The second question is, should you pay the deposit or wait for the scholarship result? In this case, the answer is no. You need to pay the deposit before the scholarship decision. The university actually states that if you awaited the scholarship, you will normally be given around 14 days to accept it and proceed, including any required deposit. And for this Global Impact Scholarship specifically, since it's cover 100% of your tuition fees, there's really no reason to pay anything in advance. So just wait for the result of the decisions. Another common question is whether you are required to return to your home country after graduation, and the answer is also no. There's no strict requirement for that. However, they do expect you to show clear intention to contribute to your community or your country in the long term. So make sure you state that in your essays. Another question I often get is, do you need very strong or impressive achievements? And I think this is something a lot of people worry about. From my experience, you don't necessarily need something extraordinary. What I would suggest is that start by listing all the things you have done, your academic work, leadership experience, volunteering, or even small projects. Then try to group them and see which one actually show your impact. Because sometimes things that feel quite small to you can actually be very meaningful if you explain them properly and show the value behind them. For me personally, there was some experience that I didn't think well important at first, but later I realized they actually helped strengthen the application when I framed them in the right way. And the final questions. Can you apply if your background is not perfectly related? I think you still can, but this is where your explanation becomes really important. Because it's not just about whether your background matches, it's about whether your story makes sense. So you need to clearly explain why you make that transition, what led you to this decision, and what you've done to prepare for it. For example, have you taken any courses, working on related projects, or developed relevant skills that support this direction? And more importantly, how does this connect to your future goals and the impact you want to create? If you can show that your journey is logical and intentional, then even a non-related background can still be a strong part of your application. So it's not having a perfect background, it's about having a clear and consistent story. So overall, if there's one thing I want you to take away from this, is that this scholarship is not about having the perfect profile. It's about having a clear story, real impact, and a strong sense of direction. If you can show that clearly, you already have a very strong application. So if you have any other questions related to the scholarship, feel free to leave a comment or reach out to me, and I will try my best to help. If you're interested in learning more about Loughborough or the university, the student life, or if you have any other question, any topics you would like me to cover, just leave a comment below. And make sure to subscribe the channel and stay tuned for more videos. See you next time.